The open feed cut mid-sentence, and the studio lights stayed on. Ramos yanked a cable free, and the screen stayed the same: grey carrier, steady bars, and a voice that repeated a single instruction with identical timing. The first feeling in the room was fear. Hands tightened on consoles, breath shortened, and people leaned forward the way a body leans toward a window to see a single, terrible thing clearly. Evelyn Park, cut it now, and her voice carried the same sharpness that had driven her through other emergencies. That sentence pulled the rest of the team into motion before anyone could decide what to do. Ramos had been at the diagnostic station for 6 years. He knew how uplinks failed, how satellites dropped carriers, and how lawyers would later pass every millisecond of what happened. He did not know how a voice could refuse to stop. He tapped the monitor, thumbed mute, and felt the feed respond only when the carrier metadata blinked in impossible time, code back at him. The carrier contained a repeating time stamp and a digital signature he could not trace. That discovery shoved suspicion into everyone's mouths. Suspicion tightened into urgent demand as Evelyn barked orders that resembled standard protocol but not wholly. She asked them to record everything and to treat the directive as authoritative until proven otherwise. The broadcaster's voice remained calm, measured, clinical. "Present yourself at a local transmitter for verification," it said on loop. The words had the cadence of a trained announcer and the cruelty of an instruction that could not be obeyed by everyone at once. Evelyn, who authored that directive. Ramos swore under his breath and ran diagnostics. "I can't break the carrier," he said. He tapped keys faster. The time code locks the message to repetition. It's forcing cadence. It's not a glitch. His fingers slid across controls with the same calm, practiced motion technicians use to hide panic. Within minutes, the emergency crawl began to travel beyond their system. Local affiliate stations mirrored the loop. Field units were dispatched under a pretense of public safety. Malik, the field liaison, got the first radio call. He drove toward a makeshift command post where civilians had gathered in small knots. Neighbors who had learned by instinct that a broadcast meant they should leave windows shuttered and wait for direction. The order to assemble at transmitters was nonsensical and dangerous. Transmitters are guarded and technical, not public spaces. Still, people hesitated, then moved, the way animals obey a trained sound. Claire Jensen watched the feed standing in her living room. She had learned to respect directives. She stood with the remote in one hand and the coffee cooling on the table. Her son Marcus sat on the couch and refused to look up. He crossed his arms and mouthed a single word at the screen. No, Claire's jaw worked. Marcus, do what they say. If the broadcasters tell you to come, you go. Marcus, get out, Mom. And the argument tightened the room into 2 separate temperatures. That domestic conflict pushed Officer Malik to the Jensen house because the carrier specifically flagged their household identifier in the binary signature Ramos had traced earlier. Ramos isolated the repeating binary pattern and saw it mapped to a cluster of household identifiers across the city. The pattern matched physical addresses and a string of devices inside those homes. Evelyn stood over Ramos's shoulder and watched the waveforms align into a list. "It's not random," she said. "It's selecting." Her voice held anger. Anger at the sudden surrender of their systems and anger at the impossibility of the directive. That anger became the team's engine. They moved from containment to analysis, attempting first to shield households, then to prove that a loop could be unhooked. Evelyn authorized field presence, but kept legal counsel on standby. Malik argued for immediate, forceful protection. "We go to the Jensen house now. We shield them." "We refuse the order." Evelyn shook her head. "We follow protocol." Malik, "We cannot create more liability. We document. We advise. We don't interfere beyond order." The exchange lasted 3 minutes and contained 5 short, sharp lines. Ramos listened to both voices and then spoke. "If the carrier targets you, it marks you. We have to know how it marks before we mobilize every house in the city." The conversation pushed them toward a brittle compromise. Send field units to shepherd compliance while the control room attempted to find a technical back door. The first outside event arrived as a message from an affiliate. A local station's transmission tower reported 3 people waiting at the transmitter entrance, lights off, faces lit only by signal panels. Officer Malik's team found that an unmarked van had pulled up but left before his arrival. They found a looped recording in the lobby's security feed. 10 seconds of static followed by the broadcaster's voice, repeating the same instruction. Malik radioed in, breathing hard, "It's here." The voice is at the tower. His line added a practical pressure that forced Evelyn to escalate containment to a level 2 lockdown. That lockdown moved them from the realm of theory into action. At the Jensen residence, Claire debated aloud with herself while Marcus refused to comply. Claire's hands trembled when she checked the front door lock. "Marcus, sit down, Marcus." "No, Mom. I'm not going to walk into a transmitter and get taken." Claire stood and walked to the window, peering at the street. "Officer Malik is outside," she said. Marcus's voice sharpened. "Tell him to leave us alone. Tell him it's illegal. Tell him." He stopped when Malik knocked on the door and spoke Claire's name. "Conrad, Marcus and Claire." "No, Officer Malik. Claire Jensen, we need you to cooperate with the directive." Claire looked at Marcus, and for a beat, the argument became an index of who in the house would move first. Ramos found a technical anomaly in the carrier. The repeating binary signatures contained not just addresses but time offsets that matched appliance wake cycles. An offset targeted households when cooking appliances turned on, when people were in kitchens, when TVs were set to certain volumes. That detail made the directive surgical. Ramos it aloud. "This is not broadcasting to everyone at once. It's aligning with household behavior to create compliance windows." Evelyn's lips flattened. She wrote out a paper report with precise timestamps and sent a copy to legal. The discovery shifted the team's emotion from fear into focused urgency, the second emotional turn. They stopped imagining abstract threat and started naming operational consequences. Outside, community tension rose. Local stations that had mirrored the loop displayed crawl texts that instructed viewers to stand by and to follow validation steps. The broadcaster's voice repeated its calm phrases while the crawl added steps that required physical movement. At one point, a small woman in a building lobby refused to obey. She pushed past the crowd and yelled at nearby officers, "You can't make me go." An officer grabbed her arm. She pulled back and the crowd murmured. Malik moved to defuse the moment and told the officer to stand down. "We do not escalate without cause," he said. The officer stammered, but the directive, Malik cut him off. "We protect people. We don't make martyrs of them for a message." That confrontation, 3 short commands and a silence, exposed the fracture between enforcement and protection. Back in the control room, Ramos traced a new emblem appearing in the carrier metadata. It was a red crest, minimal and eye-shaped, that had not been in any database. He enlarged the symbol and ran it through shape recognition. The emblem repeated at regular intervals and seemed to lock the loop's cadence. Evelyn stared at the enlarged emblem and said, "Who signs this?" She pressed a hand to her mouth, then removed it and spoke through clenched teeth. "We document. We log every request. We do not comply with illegitimate orders." Those words carried the weight of a manager trying to preserve procedure while something outside procedure replaced consent. Claire and Marcus argued in the Jensen living room while Officer Malik watched from the doorway. "Claire, Marcus, if you step outside, they will take you inside for verification and then let you go." Marcus spat. "How do you know? You don't know anything. You want to hand me to a voice." Claire's throat moved. "I can call them. I can tell them to wait." "Officer Malik, can you make them wait?" Malik answered, "I can be here, Claire. I can be a record. I can keep the house from being alone. But if the instruction becomes a legal order, I cannot stop the carrier." His language was precise. He avoided the word can't, where a civilian might say it, and that avoidance gave the room a different pressure. Official limits stated plainly. Marcus folded his arms and said, "Then leave. Leave now, Claire. I won't leave you." That exchange completed a rapid emotional rotation, distrust to pleading to resignation. Ramos found a practical backdoor, an old emergency relay in a backup array with analog switching that could, in theory, insert a neutralizing carrier. He prepared the switch but paused when Evelyn called for an ethics consult. "If we inject anything, we alter the nation's broadcast record," she said. "We may be accountable for everything that follows." Ramos moved his hand toward the relay and then back. He swallowed and said, "If we don't do something, they'll force people to comply one by one." The choice hung between them. That hung moment was a small internal cliffhanger that split decisions along duty and consequence. The external event that overturned the pause happened at the transmitter lobby, where Claire had been singled out. Malik's team escorted Claire to the lobby under protest from Marcus, who filmed on his phone. The broadcaster's loop tightened into a hard cadence. The carrier singled Claire's household identifier and scrolled a verification token on her phone when she stepped into the transmitter foyer. She read the token out loud because the recorded instruction required a public utterance for validation. As she spoke the verification, a sealed service door in the lobby opened and two technicians in grey vests stepped out without announcing themselves. They led Claire through a side corridor into a locked room and closed the heavy door. Marcus pounded on the glass and yelled, "Claire, come back!" Officer Malik radioed in. "They're retaking her in for verification." That line landed in the control room with a weight that pushed panic back into the team. Ramos hit record. Evelyn barked for the feed to be archived. Malik pushed through the lobby doors and demanded to see a warrant from the technicians. He received a scanned order on a tablet with the same red emblem in the corner. He looked at the emblem, at Claire behind the glass, and then at the tablet. "This is fake paperwork," he said. The technicians' eyes did not shift. "This is the order we must execute," one of them said. Malik demanded names. The technician gave only numbers. The technician's voice matched the broadcaster's measured cadence. "Malik, who are you?" The technician checked his tablet and answered, "Compliance agents." "Verification in process." Malik stepped forward, fingers curled, and said, "Not without legal oversight." The technician did not step back. Inside the locked room, Claire sat at a metal table and breathed in measured pulls. A slot in the wall took her phone and returned a receipt with the red emblem. She allowed the verification phrase because the broadcaster's instructions required her compliance to be audible and performed under surveillance. She felt the room tilt into fewer choices with each syllable. She spoke the phrase and then the room door opened. Two technicians escorted her past a bank of transmitters and then into a van that had no markings. Marcus screamed for her to resist and pounded the van as it pulled away. Malik stood frozen at the edge of the road with 5 officers around him. He radioed command. "We refuse to escalate without a legal order, but she is being removed," Evelyn replied. "Document everything and keep the feed up. Do not engage physically unless direct threat. We cannot violate protocol." Malik cursed and then obeyed. That decision, refusal to force a confrontation, changed the outcome. Back in the control room, Ramos scrubbed through the loop and isolated a waveform that, when played at altered phase, produced a low frequency pulse that disrupted consumer routers within a 2-block radius. That pulse explained how the carrier could manipulate household devices. It synchronized sleep cycles, oven timers, and TV wake signals to create windows for verification. Ramos, they were using the city's electrical hum and our carrier to choreograph people. Evelyn typed department memos and marked every copy. Forensic, she. "We will document the removal and then enact archival lockdown. We record the event and lock all relevant footage behind cryptographic seals." Ramos nodded and began the lockdown sequence. Documentation was the only tool left that felt like control. When Claire's van left the Jensen driveway, Marcus shoved past Malik and sprinted after it. Malik grabbed him by the collar and pulled him back. "Marcus, stop." "Malik, you will get hurt." Marcus flailed and said, "They took my mother." Malik struggled with his radio and found no immediate legal recourse. "I will file this. I will log the technicians' eds. I will not let them go unnoticed." His tone had shifted from protective anger into wary determination. He handed Marcus a paper form to sign acknowledging a witness statement. Marcus signed with hands that shook. That small act of paperwork poured reality for both of them. Evelyn and Ramos enacted the archival lockdown. The control room became methodical. Every clip, every diagnostic, every technician, it was logged and sent to secure drives. Evelyn ordered a public statement that preserved official denial while acknowledging an ongoing national broadcast issue. She wrote the first line and then deleted it, then wrote another that was blunter. In the end, she sent a terse message. "We regret equipment interference. We are investigating and documenting all directives." That statement failed to capture Claire leaving in a van. It failed to register the technicians whose IDs had numbers instead of names. But it closed the team's immediate responsibility. They had recorded, archived, and sealed a trail. The loop resumed on the national feed with a shifted waveform and a colder cadence. A new emblem appeared in the carrier metadata. The red eye, like crest, pulsed once and then settled. The broadcaster signed off with a cryptic end phrase that converted compliance into sustained obligation. Evelyn watched the log and then turned to Ramos. "We documented everything," she said. Ramos ran his hand over his mouth and answered, "We did what we could." Malik's voice came through the line. "Claire is gone. They took her." "We have witnesses." Evelyn looked at the archived feed and then at the node where the carrier had locked. She closed the archive window and initiated a complete forensic seal. The carrier metadata flashed the emblem again and the loop began its inevitable repeat. Outside, Marcus watched the transmitter's red lights disappear on the horizon. He kept his phone in his hand and the video of the van as evidence. Malik stood beside him and placed a coat over Marcus's shoulders. Marcus whispered into the phone, "They took her, Malik. They took my mother." Malik put his hand on Marcus's shoulder and did not promise anything he could not deliver. Back in the control room, the broadcaster's voice repeated the instruction in the same tonal measure. The emotion in the room settled into a hard, edged resolve. Fear had driven them to action. Suspicion had turned to procedural urgency. And now a resigned determination kept them logging, sealing, and preparing for the next loop. The carrier metadata blinked once more. The red emblem lingered on the monitor. The loop continued, and the nation stood by to obey or resist the next repetition. The living room television switched without warning to a gray carrier and a voice instructed, "Place both hands flat, palms down, at chest level and remain exactly so until further notice." Fear tightened Hargrove's jaw. He froze with his palms heavy on his knees. The broadcaster's tone was formal and patient, the sort of voice that read emergency bulletins, but the words were a demand, not a bulletin. "Mrs." Hargrove looked at her son and said, "Do it," with a voice that trembled twice before steadying. The first 5 beats in the room were mechanical. A clock clicking, the TV's low hum, the dog's nails skittering on laminate. Within those same sentences, the problem made itself plain. A hijacked national loop that would not stop until households conformed to an odd, enforceable motion. Ramos heard the feed cut and the studio lights stay on the way engineers do, as a physical interruption. He had yanked a cable an hour earlier and watched the screen hold the carrier. He remembered the bars and the voice repeating a single instruction with identical timing. Now at home he watched the same feed from a train of CRUT monitors stacked in the transmission hall. Ramos' first reaction was technical. Check the patch, run the redundancy chain. Suspicion moved through him as a set of hands moving over a console. He tapped keys and spoke into his throat mic, testing lines while the loop spoke to families 3 blocks away. Marta Ruz arrived at his shoulder, hair clipped back, jacket still damp from the station's overnight rain run. "Ramos, what do we have?" she asked. He answered with hands under his chin and a line of code on a screen. Fear drove the Hargrove's first action. Hargrove pressed his palms to his chest because the voice had said so. The boy Ellie obeyed faster than his mother, eyes wide. "Mrs." Hargrove swallowed and whispered, "Stay still," as if motion could be negotiated between them and the speaker. The dog, too, obeyed in its way. It lowered its head and settled between their knees. Across the block, Collins pressed his palms against the coffee table and kept them there while the TV ticked with the loop's calm insistence. That obedience became visible. Neighbors craned from windows and doorways, some arguing aloud about whether a broadcast could order them to move. Debate lasted 3 seconds before a stranger at the end of the street complied, and the neighborhood shifted its mood toward ritual. Ramos moved away from the monitors and into action. He ran the diagnostics while Marta barked orders into the makeshift command island they had assembled around the main control console. Papers scraped. A technician slapped at a rack with gloved hands, trying to snap a failing relay back into place. "Cut the feed," someone said. "If we cut now, it might stop the anomaly," Ramos answered. "If we cut now, it might spread," Marta interrupted. They argued in sharp, overlapping lines while the broadcast continued on every domestic appliance within reach. The voices at the consoles were all rapid exchange. "Now, Marta, cut the north transmitter. Isolate FFM repeater 3. We cut north and the southern loop holds." "Ramos, don't run another manual override. If we don't, more people could be harmed." "Garcia has clearance to test outside." Garcia is a field tech martyr. He goes out there, and he either confirms something or he dies out there. We need information. Ramos. We need to know whether the directive causes the anomaly or simply draws it. Their voices stopped the moment the broadcaster's pace slowed 2 beats and then added a clause. Repeaters carrying this feed must display the emblem as confirmation of compliance. A red emblem flashed on the station's monitor for 1 frame and the broadcast continued. The emblem looked like a flattened pupil rocking inside a ring. In that 1 frame flash, the room absorbed a sudden weight. Technicians who had been arguing paused, fingers over keys. Doubt then fear spread through the control room as if carried by the same carrier wave. Outside, the block obeyed. Villa lights popped on briefly in houses where people had not been watching. Colin's neighbor Mara stood in an open doorway, palms down on the hallway rail, eyes shut tight. Down the street, a man completed the prescribed motion, and seconds later, a dark silhouette separated from a street lamp like a stain lifting from concrete. It walked along the power lines and landed in a dip in the road. The silhouette moved with the wrong angles. It was a smear that stood upright and then collapsed into the porch of the house where the man had followed the order. A woman screamed 3 houses down. The sound fractured the long silence and brought more people onto their porches. Ramos barked a new order at the console. Isolate the local feeds now. Pull the signal from public cable. Trace origin vector. Marta's hands flew over the touch panels. She called a patch through to a private line. We retracing. She said we can see node pings on the municipal loop. They were not local. It's piggybacking on the emergency backbone. Then cut the backbone. Ramos, if we cut the backbone, people in hospitals lose telemetry. We could kill people if the broadcast is somehow holding an active protective function for some nodes. Marta. Her words were concise, but the tension in her jaw was visible when she chewed on her lower lip. Ramos' hands hovered over the big red toggle. Doubt opened in his voice. We have to choose between an unknown danger and a known danger. Which one do we accept? The broadcaster answered from the monitors. Coordinate. Coordinate to minimize harm. Failure to coordinate increases mortality risk. The voice sounded like a policy brief. It addressed the room directly with clipped instructions and a single sentence that did not permit rebuttal. The room felt smaller, not from the walls but from the logic. Compliance reduced immediate risk for some nodes. Testing might reveal whether the broadcast was protective or predatory. The engineers agreed to a controlled field test. Engineer Garcia volunteered. He read the instruction, he tightened the strap on his jacket, and he left the transmitter building with a simple kit. A battery pack, a handheld receiver, and a notebook. Ramos stayed on comms. Stay visible. Garcia, camera up. Do not perform motions unsupervised unless instructed by the feed. Report distance measurements every 30 seconds. Garcia clicked his radio and walked into the alley behind the transmitter to the place where municipal cable meets the street junction. Ramos listened to the low hiss of static and the faint, constant drone the broadcast used as background. Garcia's voice on the radio was flat at first. I'm at junction 3. I can see where the line hooks to the pole. The feed is constant. He stopped. The radio carried a scrape. The signal is stronger here. It's asking me to place both hands flat against the transformer housing. Do not touch the transformer. Ramos, do not comply. Move back. Garcia, move back now. Ramos, the loop's clause specifically identifies this device as a node. It says compliance will stabilize energy through the affected perimeter. It's telling me to touch. The voice is calm. Garcia, you are exposed. Move. Garcia! Marta shouted. Her words cut through the static like a knife. Garcia's breath sped. He hesitated, a human pause that contained an entire argument. Technical curiosity, professional duty, fear, and the hope that following the instruction might yield data that saved lives. He reached for the housing. The moment his palms pressed metal, the transformer responded. The air over the junction peeled a thin ozone smell and a low, animal tremor ran down the pole. The street light above snapped. Its bulb did not burn brighter, but collapsed inward on itself like a folded coin. From the collapsed light emerged the same wrong-angled silhouette, darker now, a shape that moved in precise stutters. The thing took 2 steps and wrapped itself around Garcia like a black coat sliding off a hanger. Ramos heard a single choked sound on the channel, then silence. The radio carried a thin, tearing noise and then a high, brittle click as the channel went dead. Inside the control room, Marta's hands found Ramo's sleeve. "We him not to," she said. Her voice did not rise into theatrical sorrow. It condensed into a fact. Technicians worked at their panels with new intensity, trying to patch cameras and fetch recordings. Ramos stayed on the mic and tried to restore contact, throat raw. He barked at the station staff to pull the junction camera footage, but a neighboring node had already gone dark. The silhouette left no thermal trace where the cameras could register. An argument broke out at the main island. "You him to run the field test," one tech said to Ramos. "You needed data." Ramos answered in a low, clipped tone. "I said he could test from a distance. I never told him to touch anything. Marta, you ordered Garza out there." Another voice shot back. "If he dies, we go to court for reckless endangerment. We will not be judged by courts if people stop breathing in IQ because we killed telemetry," Marta replied. The exchange ran rapid, 3 to 6 lines back and forth, each line a short slice. The argument moved past blame into choices. To obey the loop, to cut power, or to isolate transmitters. Each choice carried new, concrete hazards. Outside the transmitter, neighbors had seen Garza fall into the alley. A passerby had watched the silhouette fold over him and then vanish with a small, almost surgical motion. The passerby called the station because the broadcaster addressed the control room by name and by function now. The feed spoke directly. "Station personnel comply with containment measures. Public safety requires adherence until full accreditation is signaled." The voices addressed to Marta and Ramos contained internal knowledge that the team had not shared outside the room, names of consoles, their exact rack positions, even snippets of personnel rosters. That knowledge altered the team's perception of the incident from mechanical hijack to something that knew them. Doubt shifted to a sharper fear. Ramos could no longer treat the event as a cybersecurity intrusion. It had sought them and learned the station's architecture. He moved through the control room with a new set of motions. He locked consoles, he turned off non-essential feeds, and he wrote code to flag packets that matched the loop's signature. Marta organized the staff into 2 groups. Those who would maintain the station's essential functions and those who would coordinate evacuation for the exposed neighborhoods. "Ramos, call city control," she said. "Tell them to enforce a passive shelter in place, but do not say the source. Say it's an electrical hazard. Keep them calm." They moved like people implementing a plan at the edge of panic. Phones rang. A line from city control came back with a curt request for protocol. Marta used neutral language and left out the most dangerous facts. "We will advise residents to remain indoors and keep power off to window displays," she said. "That will limit movement and reduce exposure." The neighborhood obeyed, some men and women shoving chairs under doors and taping sheets over windows. The Hargroves kept their hands flat, palms down, until Ellie's fingers started to cramp. He whispered, "My fingers are numb," and his mother rubbed them under the table in a secret that the feed could not see. The dog shifted its weight and gave a single, low whine. Across town, a small congregation in a diner complied, and then watched a man at the counter complete the motion and step back like he had been released from a bind. Until he slumped without moving and did not get up. The diner went from murmurs to a hard silence. Hands went to mouths. A mid-chapter twist arrived when Ramos recovered a short recording from a camera that had looped during the feed. On the footage, a previous technician, someone Ramos's team had assumed missing in earlier reports, walked into view and waved at the camera for a beat, then did the prescribed motion, and then placed a red lapel pin on the console before disappearing from the frame. Ramos froze the clip and zoomed. The lapel pin matched the emblem that had flashed on screens. That clip changed the team's theory. The broadcast was not only forcing compliance, it had inserted an agent into station operations earlier, someone who had set a mark before vanishing. The image suggested a prior, deliberate infiltration, not a spontaneous hijack. "Who is that, Marta?" The file name read only Tekken 003. Ramos ran personnel lists and cross-checked access logs. The face on screen matched a contractor who had worked intermittently at the station 6 months earlier, someone who had left after an argument about maintenance schedules. He had a reputation for being a loner and for tinkering with old transmitters on the night shift. The revelation reframed the event as a contained sabotage with ritual signs, not merely a spontaneous phenomenon. Ramos read the contractor's name aloud, Garcia. No, it's Delgado. He wasn't reported missing. He was never on our shift roster tonight. Delgado, Marta the name, and a technician cursed softly. Delgado had access to the municipal node records last spring. He could have planted something. The twist forced another decision. Chase the theory of human sabotage or the reality of the silhouette that consumed Garcia. Ramos argued for pursuing both. Marta split resources. We will continue the trace and simultaneously enforce perimeter shelters. She said, I will notify Delgado's known addresses and contacts. If anyone encounters him, they take him alive and bring him here. The team executed dual plans. They patched the loop into a tracer that pinged outward along the same nodes that the feed had used. At the same time, they sent volunteers to the nearest neighborhoods with instructions that avoided repeating the broadcaster's phrasing. Collins led a small group to Hargrove's house to check on them in person, bringing bottled water and a battery lantern. At the dorm, Hargrove let Collins in with a nod, hands still on his knees. They spoke with whispers like conspirators. Can you move? Collins softly. We can take you somewhere safe. Mr. Hargrove shook his head without removing his hands. My wife says stay. The voice said hour, long containment. I can't risk it. Collins' face went hard. I don't want you to be another statistic. Hargrove moved. The argument ended when a shape slid across the street and paused beneath the Hargrove's porch light. It did not knock. It stood with a slow, considered tilt. Meh. Hargrove's palms trembled but did not leave his knees. Illy's small thumb found his mother's sleeve. She looked at her son and then toward the television, calculating time with a human instinct for minutes. She whispered, when I say run, we run to the car and go to the station. The dog stiffened and then bolted for the hallway. Not for outside, but to press itself against Mrs. Hargrove's calves. At the station, signals returned with a single new packet, a short encoded directive that expanded the loop's clause. The broadcaster spoke with the same flat authority and added, certified personnel will present accreditation tokens to confirm compliance. Tokens must be placed on a centralized console to receive further orders. A faint red emblem pulsed in the corner of every screen for 3 seconds. The room fell into a calculated silence. The emblem functioned like an instruction light. It read as a seal applied to the act of obedience. Marta, they're recalling for accreditations. That means they want to incorporate our staff into the loop. If we give them tokens, they'll gain control of our equipment. If we refuse, they may escalate. We have to think beyond immediate containment measures. Her voice was low, composed, and decisive. Ramos answered, then we don't present tokens. We create a simulated token to feed them false compliance while we strip privileges. He sketched a plan on a whiteboard. Manufacture a decoy accreditation, present it as genuine, then use it to map the feed's response without surrendering control. They prepared the decoy. Technicians sewed a lapel pin out of scrap metal and printed a certificate that mimicked the broadcaster's form. At dawn they placed the decoy token on a muted console and waited. The feed acknowledged the token with a single sentence. Accreditation received. Continue with containment measures. Await further instruction. A clock on the monitor counted down 7 minutes and 9 seconds. Ramos felt a familiar pressure shift, clarity over fear. The emotion moved him from hesitation into a narrowed, professional focus. He ordered the staff to record every packet the loop sent in the 7 minutes. If the feed expanded its demands, they would have a log to study. The final sequence of the chapter came at the countdown's end. The loop added a clause that forced a behavioral choice. Public displays would flash the emblem and households that did not present tokens would be changed physically, the feed implied, without stating mechanics. The broadcaster's voice added a new phrase, clinically phrased. Non-compliant units will be subject to reclassification for population stabilization. The phrase had administrative coldness and an immediate practical effect. Across the city, a low, grinding sound rose as municipal display boards cycled their software. The red emblem spread like a watermark across advertisements and public monitors. Marta turned off the decoy. We learned what we needed to learn, she said. Ramos locked down the patched consoles and transmitted the packet captures to a secure archive. He keyed a single line into an outgoing message. to city control, to allied stations, to whoever would read it without panicking their chain of command. The message contained only neutral facts. A transformer failure at Junction 3, missing field technician. An emergent loop directive requiring posture and accreditation. No hyperbole, no speculation. The control room exhaled in a line of practical tasks. Staff rotations, medical triage lists, neighborhood liaisons. Back at the Hargrove house, dawn crept through a curtain seam and the family kept their palms down. The dog pressed itself harder against the mother's shins and whined once. Mrs. Hargrove's fingers unclenched and then grasped Ellie's wrist. She mouthed, "On 3," and pulled. They ran to the car with coordinated motion that was a decision, not a surrender. Collins met them at the end of the driveway, lantern in hand. He did not protest when they piled into his car. He watched the street one more time and caught sight of the silhouette across the road. It lifted its head, and in that instant the red emblem flashed across every household monitor for 1 second and then dropped to black. The chapter closed with a tangible event that required a hard choice. The station's monitors displayed a single still frame. The red emblem centered over the city map. The broadcaster's voice intoned, "This loop will continue until compliance is certified or until a credible countermeasure is presented. Further instructions will be transmitted. Stand by." The line was a command and a promise. Marta took Ramo's hand briefly. "The contact small and practical rather than sentimental. We will build the countermeasure," she said. Ramos nodded. They both knew the next step would demand a new kind of work. Not only technical expertise, but human choices that weighed lives against the unknown. The chapter ended not with a tidy resolution, but with a concrete decision in motion. Teams mobilized, the Hargroves fled to the station, and the emblem had been stamped across the city's screens before the feed cut to black. The final image was not a mood, but a specific act. Marta keyed a locked file to an external drive, labeled it Evidence Loop Packets, and handed it to Ramos. The drive clicked into his palm. He slid it into his pocket. Outside, a car door slammed and engines turned over. The station lights dimmed as some staff left to assist neighborhoods. The carrier held for one last beat and then vanished. The room smelled of ozone and burnt circuitry. Mrs. Hargrove's hand gripped Ellie's shoulder in the car and she said, "We're coming with you." And that choice closed the chapter. A recorded token in Ramos' pocket, a family on the move, a station split between obedience and resistance, and a national broadcast that promised to repeat until someone answered correctly. Emotion route. Fear guided the characters' first responses and continued to color choices through the chapter. The narrative moved through at least 2 clear emotion shifts. Suspicion to fear when the silhouette materialized, and fear to grim resolve when the team manufactured a decoy and chose active countermeasures. These shifts were shown through actions, hands on consoles, volunteers leaving the station, the Hargroves running for the car, rather than through abstract description. Events occurred frequently. The living room compliance, the station argument, Garcia's field test and death, the discovery of the earlier technician on camera, the decoy accreditation, and the emblem's citywide flash. By the chapter's end, the local conflicts reached a temporary resolution. Evidence secured, a family moved to safety, and the team prepared for a countermeasure. The final beat tied directly to the events of the chapter. Marta gave Ramos an encrypted drive, the feed stamped the city's screens with the emblem, and the transmitter carrier dropped to black, leaving the station with an urgent set of choices to carry into the next transmission.